Hi there, Bishop Craig Bergland with episode 2 of my new video blog. I'm glad you're joining me. I hope you had the opportunity to see the first one. If you didn't, the beauty of YouTube is that it's always there available to you. I wanted to talk this morning about something that happened to me. It must have been the night before last, that caused me to really reflect on some of the changes that I've gone through in my life, how the person that I am today is a profoundly different person than I was, say, 15 or 20 years ago. And it's not just the effects of aging or the effects of being so smashingly good looking. Instead, rather, it's an attitudinal thing in me that has changed. You know, I used to be a pretty hard-driven guy. In my years growing up at home, I lived in a pretty critical environment. You either succeeded or failed. You either did the right thing or you completely screwed up. It was not only critical, it was dualistic. It was an environment which didn't recognize any shades of gray whatsoever. And even as that was happening, I sensed within myself a feeling that this wasn't right. And yet, as you may be aware of from your childhood experiences, as we grow, we internalize the situations around us. We normalize them. We decide that since this is all we know, and since our environment needs to be okay, solid, safe, in order for us to feel safe and able to do the things we have to do to grow, we assume these things are normal. And as a result, I got into my 20s, and I was the same way. Hard driven, do what I say, no black or white, no gray rather, everything black or white. And it, in some areas of my life, served me quite well. In my profession at the time, which was a field service, I did field service on diagnostic medical equipment. I was, for quite a while, the ideal employee. I was the youngest, the fastest, the most under budget. Just superlative from an employer's perspective. I'm not so I was so superlative from a relationship perspective. I'm not sure the people whom I was in relationship with would have thought I was so fantastic beyond my ability to bring in money, which I did very well. And then my children were born. And I started finally to follow this call that I believed I had been hearing for some years to move toward ministry. Started doing the things that were necessary to get into that place. But that took some time. And as I reflect on it, I was still not very nuanced in my responses or approaches to things. And in fact, you might say, and I will say, that it was, this change in me began about 10 or 12 years ago now, as I was exposed to the benefits of a meditative, contemplative sort of prayer practice. As I started to see that spending time in the silence, spending time repeating a mantra, and spending a lot of time doing that was something that really resonated with me. It was a practice that allowed me, for the most part, to live my life. Certainly, sometimes I did it very focused and very intentionally. Other times, I just had some prayer beads in my hand while I was watching television, and just continued with the mantra. And it certainly wasn't an overnight transformation. But let me show you how profound the transformation was. In our living room, I was not a part of this decision, but in our living room, despite the fact that we have young grandchildren living with us, and spill-prone young 20-somethings, early 20-somethings, we have a throw rug that is primarily white and has some brown sort of geometric stuff going on it. And 2 nights ago, a bottle of Louisiana hot sauce somehow hit the floor and ruptured. And it looked like we had been slaughtering beef in the middle of this white rug. I can honestly say, and you may resonate with this, that 15 or 20 years ago, I'd have been through the roof. No doubt about it. Even 10 years ago, when I was first starting these practices, I'd have been through the roof. But this time, and not for the first time, but this time not at all. I think there's something that we gain. I know there's something that we gain through training ourselves meditatively, contemplatively, mantra practice-wise. I would imagine yoga would do the same thing, although I've never done yoga. In training ourselves to take a step back, to disconnect from the stimulus-response reality that animals live in, and that so many humans who believe that we're some sort of advanced level of animal live in, where something happens, I don't stop to evaluate it, I just respond. When we respond that way, we respond most often very viscerally. We don't have the time to take a step back and say, as in the hot sauce incident, well, did this person decide it would be a good idea to throw this bottle of hot sauce on the floor and hope against hope that it would rupture? Well, of course not. Who would decide that? Did somebody decide that a blood red stain in the middle of the white carpet would be very attractive? Maybe a butcher would, but there aren't any butchers living in my home, so that's not really too likely. Did somebody decide that they wanted to watch me try and clean up a carpet for a while, so they threw the hot sauce onto the floor hoping that it would rupture? You can see from these examples and many others that I could come up with that no reasonable person would have wanted this to happen. By my exploding, if I had chosen that option, going off, coming across way over the top, would the hot sauce have been removed from the carpet? Could the strength and unreasonableness of my response have caused time to move backward several minutes and undone what had happened? Of course not. Despite all the findings of the new physics, it's not, and I am a fan of the new physics, it's not reasonable to believe that the intensity of my response would be in any way connected toward a disruption in the space-time continuum that would have made things different. And so, what would the point be? In first of all, expending that kind of energy. In second of all, elevating my blood pressure. In third of all, doing damage to the ones I loved by the things I had said, I might have said, or had done, or might have done. Isn't it far better to just take a step back and say, what do we need to do the best we can to correct the problem at hand? I believe it is. But I don't believe that most of us were raised in an environment where that just naturally is a skill we acquire. Some of you may have been very lucky in that regard. But those of us who are in my generation and the generation that follows me were either raised by parents who lived through the Great Depression, or who had parents, our parents' parents, we have grandparents, who lived through the Great Depression as a child. And so there was in their lives an understanding of the relationship to things that's very different from our relationship to things. And so the odds were, if you lived in a household like mine, or if your parents did, something got scratched, it was a terrible thing because there might not be the ability to get another one. never mind if the scratch affected the functionality of the equipment at all. We live in a new day. And while there's certainly things about consumer capitalist culture that I don't think are the greatest for the human condition, and while we're presently in a recession, I can't think of anything in this world that is worth more to me than my relationships. I also can't think of anything in this world that's worth more to me or worth so much to me that I would be willing to damage someone even that I just met or can barely tolerate by some sort of demonstrative display of my might that won't change reality one little bit. In fact, you might say that I have been able, through practice, through spiritual practice, to change my own reality, my own response, and have in the process become a person who I'm much happier with, who's much more pleasant to be around. And you can do that too. And you might be better at it than me, and it may not take you, I've noticed a transformation for some years. It may not take you the 5 years that it took me before I really started to notice dramatic change. But even if it does, the little changes start within 30 days. Why not take on a spiritual practice? Your family will thank you. Your friends will thank you. Most importantly, probably, you'll thank you at some point down the road. If you need help doing that, you can contact me by email at christandlight@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to send you information and suggestions free of charge that we together might work to make this world a better place and this holiday season much calmer. Because if you realize that spending time with the ones you love is the most important thing, when you're spending time with them, nothing should be able to disrupt that. Till next time, I'm Bishop Craig Bergland. Namaste.